Good morning or good afternoon to you, depending on which part of the world you might be listening to this presentation. A huge welcome to you all and thank you so much for listening to my presentation. My name is Gillian Jones-Williams and I'm delighted to be talking to you on International Women's Day, on a day when we're celebrating everything that is unique and wonderful about women. And I'd like to share my last 20 years of experience with you about what makes women successful in the key traits of successful women, which we've called the 8 8s. In my experience in talking to women, coaching senior executives, and also being a female entrepreneur, I've observed certain consistent characteristics that female women have, and in the next hour I'll be sharing them in our new model. Today, on the 8th of March, I'm doing a speakathon for charity, and this means I'm addressing 4 audiences face-to-face in London. And this presentation is being shown around the world by many organisations, so my goal is to reach as many women as possible. I'm doing this for my charity, Aurora New Dawn, which is a charity that supports women who are victims of violence, abuse and stalking. So, here's our agenda. When we say traits of successful women, we're not necessarily saying leadership. We're talking about feeling successful in whatever you decide to do in life. So I want to talk to you about how to live a life by design and not by accident. And also look at how to empower yourself by taking control of your mind. Also to get you thinking about your mindset, your gravitas, your resilience. And we're going to finish off with some quotes from women who really have made it. So, what qualifies me to talk to you? Well, actually, not much really in the way of qualifications. In fact, you're probably all better qualified than me. However, even without qualifications, I've run a successful international training company for 20 years, working with a whole range of major organisations and published a few books. But how did it all start? Well, my mother was a chronic manic depressive, so I had a very turbulent relationship, and therefore I rebelled at school. In fact, I was asked to leave and only come back for my exams. In those days, I wasn't excluded, but I would think it was only because they couldn't bear the thought of my mother coming up to the school for a conversation. Having said that, I somehow managed to get 10 of what they called O-levels in those days. So, not a great start. I went to college, but unfortunately only lasted 2 weeks because I decided I needed a job, so there was never ever going to be any university for me either. At this point, my father very kindly intervened, and he sent me to something called Alan Knight's Secretarial College for Ladies. It probably looked a bit like that in those days, although that looks like John Cleese is teaching me. Alan Knight despaired of me and used to walk around saying, "Gillian, Gillian, Gillian, what will become of you?" Well, what became of me was I got into recruitment and I absolutely loved it. That was in the days when we actually met people and interviewed them pre-internet, so it was quite a fun role. I became number 2 in command to the managing director of the recruitment agency. And as well as doing recruitment, we also did some training for our franchises. One day, one of our clients, a big ferry company, asked me if we did any training, could we do customer service training for the whole organisation? I, of course, said yes, bid for it, because we always like to challenge, and actually got the job, delivered the first workshop, and everybody was very, very happy. However, whilst the managing director was on holiday, there was a case of sexual harassment in the agency. The rather large IT consultant who had much too much to drink at lunchtime verbally harassed the part-time receptionist there. When he sobered up, I decided to interview him. He was very embarrassed. He agreed to resign, so I felt like we dealt with it. But unfortunately, when the managing director returned, he said that he wanted to bring the man back and he didn't think it was that serious. So a big argument ensued, at which point I said I couldn't work for an organisation that condoned sexual harassment, and he said that I had to make my own choice. my choice was to say I would leave. So I got what you call being bin-linered, which is when someone escorts you to your desk immediately, puts all your possessions in, and you leave there and then. The next morning I had a call from the ferry company who said, we've phoned the agency and we understand you don't work there anymore. And I said, no, I'm very, very sorry I don't. And they said to me, well, in that case, what's happening with our training? And I said, you need to phone the agency now. They said, but we bought you. So they contracted with me directly, which is how my training company started. Unfortunately, I also got a lawsuit from the agency. So there I was with no intention of starting a business, a big client who had 600 people being trained, no name, no company, and a lawsuit. And that's how it all started. So, before we look at the 8/8, let's have a look at where the UK is generally with gender parity. And it's not great. With the 97% of CEOs in the FTSE 350, only 11 of them are women. And achieving the government target of women making up 33% of the FTSE 350 is looking increasingly unlikely, according to the results of the Pipeline's annual Women's Count report. In fact, there's not much progress being made, as you can see by these figures here. If we look at the FTSE 100 in the UK, we actually do have 7 women who are in senior positions, although it's very interesting to look at when they were appointed in these senior positions. In fact, there are more men named John in senior positions in the FTSE 100 than there are women in senior positions. However, in the Middle East, surprisingly enough, things are very, very different. It's way ahead. The UAE have issued a gender parity guide with bronze, silver and gold standards regarding gender parity that all companies need to comply with by 2021. So as you can see, there is a big drive there, and in the UK, we certainly need to do more. But what's the real issue with gender parity, and why is it so difficult for women to get to senior positions? There are many, many reasons, but one of them is in this chart here when we start to look at the family work dynamic. What we have is we have a traditional bell curve here, and at the far left we have perhaps 20% of women who are simply home-centred. They are very, very happy being at home with their family. If they do work, they don't want a job that interferes with them being a mother, a partner or a wife. And at the other end of that scale, we have another 20% who have always been and always will be totally focused on their careers, and that's their choice to focus on it. But here's where it becomes more adaptive. In the middle, we have 60% of women whose feelings about work, whose needs, whose wants and ambitions will change according to many, many different types of situation. Perhaps they have children, the children are very, very young, they want their career put on hold, but only for a couple of years, and then they want to have another conversation about it. Or perhaps they're later on in life and they're starting to become a prime carer, or perhaps their children are going through exams, or they just have a bigger family. So there's lots of different dynamics which can affect women throughout their life. The difficult thing is the conversations that women need to have, and often we don't have these conversations early enough, if we have them at all. And often managers are not equipped to have those conversations, i.e. to say, I know you've just come back from maternity, but where do you want to be in 3 or 4 years? And do you want us to start looking at how you might prepare yourself rather than wait for 4 years and then say, okay, now I'm ready for something more senior? So part of what we need to look at is how, as women, we become more proactive in having those conversations, and how organisations support their managers to be able to do it. Because the issue, as Sheryl Sandberg very, very nicely put it, is that careers are a jungle gym and not a ladder. No longer are there linear paths in organisations for us to be promoted to. And therefore we need to take a lot more control and decide what we want to do, who we want to work with, and find creative ways to get in front of people. Anyway, a jungle gym sounds much, much more fun because if you're on a ladder, you're generally always gazing at someone's backside. But to be successful, you need to take real responsibility for your career. And remember that, careers don't always start at the time that we thought in life. Some people didn't start doing what they wanted to do and felt passionate about until quite late. Here's a few examples. At age 23, Oprah Winfrey was fired from her first reporting job. Meanwhile, Vera Wang failed to make the Olympic figure skating team and didn't get the editor-in-chief position at Vogue, and designed her first dress at age 40. At age 24, Stephen King was working as a janitor and living in a trailer, and at age 30, Harrison Ford was a carpenter. Even later in life, Alan Rickman gave up his career as a graphic designer at 42 to become an actor. So as you can see, careers can start at any point. So let's look at the model and let's look at what we call Elevate, the 8 traits of successful women that I have observed and discussed over the years. Here they are. And let's take each one of these in turn. First of all, let's look at vivid visualization. This is the power that we have in our brain to be able to program ourselves so that we have a great internal personal vision which helps us to achieve goals. Fearless focus, how we put a strong spotlight on achieving those goals and don't become detracted for it. We're tirelessly determined and constantly looking for those wider opportunities. Number 3 is how we believe we are positioned in life, and that those beliefs are positively affirming and strengthen confidence in all situations. And it's all very well having those 3, but the ability to say what we mean and mean what we say by elegantly but assertively expressing our views and wants and needs, and also dealing with many, many different characters. Number 5 is those women who are masters of ensuring that they focus on doing the right things at the right time. And number 6 is about being able to constantly maintain peak performance and actually enjoy every part of your life by being able to sustain yourself. Number 7, about being an absolutely great networker, and so many women find this difficult, but the importance of having great connections and thriving in networking situations is critical. And finally, to really ensure it all happens, we have what we call relentless resilience, the ability to not just bounce back, but bounce forward from setbacks, and also to constantly learn from experience. A wise man once said to me, life is just a test, and that is oh so true. So, let's continue our journey through the 8 traits, and starting first of all with vivid visualizations and what you actually want your life to be like. I mentioned in our introduction, is it a life by design or is it a life by accident? Are you where you hoped you would be at this point in your life? And in 10 years' time, will you be where you hoped you would be today? Trite, I know, but very, very true. If you don't know where you're going, you will inevitably end up somewhere else, and maybe that's okay for you. But the most successful women have their own vision of where they're going. They can see it, hear it, feel it, almost touch it, and they don't hold back. Their goals are big, audacious, and invigorating. But more importantly, they use the power of the brain to regularly visualize that success and refresh it. They take time out of their everyday life to elevate themselves above the day-to-day dross and think about their goals and remind themselves of their purpose in life. And here are some of the things which really help us to get vivid visualization. The dreams are big. We understand that our brain responds to what we ask it to give us. And we think about very, very positively the goals we're trying to achieve, so we're not considering failure. And of course, turning those plans, those dreams into plans at the end. And again, to quote Sheryl Sandberg, sometimes those dreams really are very audacious. Dream big and don't consider failure. Feel the fear and do it anyway. And as many of you who have faced a fear and put yourself out there knows, it really, really does feel amazing. So having a dream is important, but once you have that dream, it needs to turn into reality. And here are some of the things that we need to consider in order to achieve their goals. Often life will take our focus away from the bigger picture. And the thing is, you can be anything that you want to in life, providing you have three things: desire, belief, and ability. The ability can be something that you work on to attain the skills, knowledge, and experience, but the desire and belief comes from that vivid visualization and fearless focus. And once you know what you want, you start talking about it to people, and the opportunities are always out there. So if you're absolutely sure on what you want and stay focused, picking yourself up when something goes wrong means that you'll really, really achieve it. That also means ensuring that your vision fits in with your values and that you really have a laser focus on these goals and you're regularly going back and revisiting them and checking them that your desire is still very, very strong. And you look for those opportunities as well. So what you think about, you get most. And let's look at somebody who had vivid visualization and fearless focus. And what I'd like you to think about is an actress, and that actress is Whoopi Goldberg. Now, if you picture Whoopi Goldberg, and I'm sure you're all doing that now, she isn't necessarily the most traditionally beautiful actress. Wonderful, wonderful character, but Whoopi Goldberg grew up in the days when actresses truly were very, very traditionally beautiful, and she wasn't. Whoopi Goldberg also grew up in what she described as the projects, which means that she didn't have a great start in life, so she wouldn't be going to a school where she got a great education. But when Whoopi Goldberg achieved her Oscar for the Best Supporting Actress, and a quick pop test for you here, because she was only the second black actress to achieve an Oscar. Anybody thinking of what film that was for? Many people will say Sister Act, but it isn't. It was actually Ghost. And when she achieved that, in her speech, she talked about how much she dreamed. Right from a child, she dreamed of it all her life. And not one of those gushing speeches that you generally hear from actresses. It was a really heartfelt one. And you can picture Whoopi Goldberg as a child with her bedroom covered in posters of Oscar-winning actresses. And you can picture her going to school and them asking her what she'll do when she leaves, and her saying, I'm going to be an Oscar-winning actress, and the fun that must have been made of this slightly awkward-looking young girl here. And then you can picture how many auditions that Whoopi Goldberg went for and got rejected for before she got her first break. That is true visualization and fearless focus. Alongside that, getting to grips with beliefs is critical, and it's all about confidence. So, you people listening to me now, you're not confident people, are you? Okay? I'm not a confident person. Nobody is actually a confident person, because confidence isn't a constant. Confidence is something that we manufacture for different situations, and whilst we may appear to be confident for a good proportion of the time, there are certain days when we'll feel less than confident, or there are certain situations where we will feel less than confident too. So we need the ability to manufacture our confidence. As a child who was brought up, as I said, in a very, very turbulent relationship with my mother, I suffer from very low self-esteem. And I know that there is no cure for low self-esteem because it carries on throughout your life. I always looked for one and couldn't find one. So therefore, I have to work on a daily basis on techniques and strategies to make me feel more confident, even in situations where I might have been confident before. And here's where it all begins, in the mind, with number 3 of the 8s, the bold beliefs. If you don't know how you feel about yourself, or you feel indifferently, or you even dislike yourself, that is what will cause the problem. And if you can believe in yourself, it makes a huge difference to how optimistic you are and how you project yourself. To be confident, we really, really need to manage our internal dialogue. And when I talk about internal dialogue, what I'm talking about is the voices inside your head. And if any of you are sitting there saying, what voices? I don't have voices in your head. That's the voice that we're talking about. Almost every successful woman that I've coached and worked with has talked about the impact that the voice in their head has. These voices should be positive and helpful to us. They should help us to take learning from situations. But a lot of the time, these voices can be destructive. They can take us down negative chains of thoughts if we like them. Sorry, if we allow them to. So being able to control the voice in our head is absolutely critical. And also being able to judge our own performance. If we have a driving need for approval and want to be liked and loved by everybody, then we are always going to be disappointing ourselves, which also stays in line with our values and allows us to behave authentically. So how long are you prepared to listen to the rubbish that your voices inside your head shout and the beliefs that it gives you there? Because if you're not careful, it can lead to a condition which has always been around but has now actually been given a name. And that condition is called imposter syndrome. And this has been defined by Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes as a feeling of phoniness in people who believe they're not intelligent, capable or creative, even though there is sufficient evidence to show that they are. So many women that I coach in very, very senior positions often, as soon as they feel able enough to be vulnerable, will say to me, I keep waiting for someone to catch me out, or they've put me in this job and I'm not really sure that I know what I'm doing. It's a really, really strong belief that can affect us and make us feel that way. And if you continue to allow your beliefs to do that, then it can become very, very destructive. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to try a big group exercise. If it doesn't work for you as a big group exercise, then quite simply do it yourself later on. But first of all, what I would like you to do is I would like you to think of a limiting belief that you hold about yourself. Maybe it's, I'm no good at presentations. Maybe it's, I hate networking. Maybe it's, I never have anything useful to say at meetings, or I'll never get promoted. So can you think of something that is holding you back? And when you're ready, what I'd like you to do is to go through these questions with me. So first of all, what is the belief you hold? Really, really articulate it well so that it's true for you. And if that belief is, I'm no good at presentations, or I've never been any good at presentations, or I'm not as clever as other people, make sure that you've got the right words in your head. And then ask yourself, where did this limiting belief come from in the first place? And have a think about that. Did it come from a comment that somebody once made? Is there any evidence around it? And then I'd like you to think about, in what ways does this limit you? How does it actually hold you back? And also, what caused you to decide that this was true for you? So even if somebody did once make a comment, what made you decide that this was a fact? Now what I'd like you to do is to think about how this limiting belief really serves you. Does it help you? What does it do for you? Now I'd like you to think about the consequences of holding on to this belief. In 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, if you still believe this about yourself, what could be happening? What difference could it make? Now here's the really important bit. What would you rather believe about yourself? Would you rather believe, I'm great at doing presentations, I'm perfectly intelligent, I'm quite able to manage meetings? Try now and rephrase that belief into one that you would rather think and believe about yourself. And now what I'd like you to do is to think about, if you were to hold that new belief, how might things improve with it? Okay. Now think about, how might things worsen if you held that new belief? You're probably sitting there thinking, well, it wouldn't. It wouldn't worsen at all. And my final question is, what might stop you from adopting this new belief? I'm betting that the answer to that is me, because that is all it's about. We are the only people who stop us from changing our beliefs. So one of the ways to help you, and I do hope that you've managed to change your belief, but just thinking it doesn't do all the work, then you've got to keep reinforcing it. And research has shown it can take up to 21 days for you to be able to change a habit of believing something different about yourself. So here's a good way of reminding yourself. If that belief starts to creep in again, the old one, I'm not good at presentations, catch it. And then check it. Do you want to be thinking about yourself? Is this the right belief to help you to be successful in what you want to do? And then change it. And if the new belief that you found isn't the right one, it's not settling with you, then go back to it and think about it again. What is its purpose and what will it do for you? I hope that's helped you to start thinking about your beliefs and how to change imposter syndrome. But just believing in yourself isn't, I'm afraid, going to make the difference. The ability to express yourself is critical, and expressing yourself with power, presence, and impact. Successful women are always working on their emotional intelligence, but in particular managing their personal state to allow themselves to present in the right way. Here are some of the things which are really, really important about the way that we present ourselves. Gravitas I'm going to talk about in a second, but that fluidity in communication that makes people want to listen to you, that ability to respond in an assertive, firm, but pleasant way, and certainly to be able to say no, or at least to modify the ask. And I know that's one of the issues that a lot of women have a problem with. But the other important thing is not taking it to the other end of the scale and becoming so assertive that people see you as a table banging, very, very unmovable type of person. So being able to use empathy in the right way is really, really important. And also to not avoid confrontation. Many people, and I think this happens to males as well, but a lot of women struggle very much with having what we call courageous conversations. We store it all up, we keep it inside until one day we blow. And also our ability to negotiate as well. So going back to managing your state so that you're able to articulate in an audacious fashion, one of the things we have to remember is that at any given time, in any given day, we are always choosing our behaviour. And choosing our behaviour means that however you have behaved in the last few months, that has been your choice at that moment. No one has made you angry. Nobody has made you upset or irritated you. They may have made you feel that way, but you have the ability and also the responsibility to choose how you respond. Is that true? I can almost see you sitting there thinking, did I have a choice then, or did I just get so angry that I wasn't able to choose my behaviour? When I have conversations with people about it, normally the final outcome is they say, okay, you're right, you can choose your behaviour, because of course the question has to be, well, if you're not choosing it, who is? And you're in control of your own brain. But it's difficult, and some people haven't learnt how to control their behaviour yet. So if we have the ability to choose how we respond to any situation, how do we manage to do that? And what are the skills that we really need to work on to make sure that we are presenting positively in that way? And one of the things that we have to do is to think about where we have the active choice. Now, in any given situation, there will be a stimulus. That stimulus might be another person, something that they say to you, or it might just be the way that they look at you, or it might be a situation. It might be a driver in a car. It could be a repeated situation or an email. It could be anything. That stimulus is going to extract a response from us. But between stimulus and between response, we have the freedom to choose. And that freedom to choose is based on these things which come from self-awareness again. And that might be our ability to manage our state, to really think about, what do I want to be at this moment? It might be about some positive self-talk that we've done before the situation to encourage ourselves to be able to think about what could happen, what might happen, and how can I be prepared and ready for it. And there is a train of thought which talks about something called a 90-second rule. And that 90-second rule is the time that we've had since the stimulus hit us and the response. And during that 90 seconds, what we need to do is to manage our adrenaline. So you can almost think of this a bit like Mission Impossible, really. You have 90 seconds to choose whether or not to adopt this state. And now you have the time to think about other things that you can do to change it. So, for example, if a stimulus started you on that dreadful situation which we never ever want to encounter at work, where our bottom lip starts to tremble and we think we're going to cry, and we're in a public place where it really wouldn't be perceived very well, and you will be labelled for the rest of your career as that emotional one, how do we stop ourselves? Well, what we need to do is we need to manage our adrenaline, because once our adrenaline takes control of us, we lose the ability to think. I expect if you reflect, you can think of times when it's been very, very hard for you to think straight and you've walked out saying, I wish I'd said that, or even worse, I wish I hadn't said that. And the reason that it's been so difficult for you is because your adrenaline has pushed you into a feelings mode, and therefore the adrenaline is sending the blood around the body to the organs that need it most in fight or flight, and diverting the blood away from the brain, which means that you don't have sufficient blood circulating for you to be able to think clearly and do what you need to do. So therefore, if you can recognize that you're being hit by adrenaline, take a good deep breath, distract yourself, ask a question to let the brain know you're not in trouble, the blood will flood back into your brain and you'll find yourself being able to think much clearly. But you have to intervene very, very early in order to change your state. The other thing we talked about in terms of articulation is about gravitas, and gravitas is a very, very difficult word. A lot of people find it's hard to define it, but it's talked about so much. I coach a lot of women where they've had some feedback to say, yes, you're ready for a senior position, you're certainly doing everything you should be, and your credibility depends on you having more gravitas. So what actually is it? Well, I guess it's presence. It's the aura that you present that makes people want to listen to you and to take you very, very seriously and being noticed. And therefore, here are some of the things which will really, really help you to present yourself with gravitas. Number one, that great posture is absolutely vital. Walking into a room as if you are holding your space with your shoulders back, looking as if you are thrilled to be there and meet new people, rather than scurrying in and trying to almost become invisible till you get to your chair, is going to be critical. Also, good posture helps you to project confidently. If you are slightly scrunched up or you don't have your chin up enough, it will be quite difficult for you to get the right sound out. As we said earlier, demonstrating empathy is really important, and also seeking to understand before you seek to be understood. I think that came from the great management guru, Stephen Covey. Often we reveal too much information before we ask people what's going on in their situation, and certainly there is a lot of gravitas which comes with being able to say to people, before we start, can I ask you where you are on this? Because one of the problems that we have as women is often saying more than we need to when we're nervous. And getting the balance between sounding emotional and passionate is a really, really fine line. So, say what you mean what you say, and say it with attitude. So let's move on to the fifth of the eights, and this is about prioritization. Life is overwhelming, and that certainly is a fact. I don't know if it is for you, it certainly is for me. Particularly if you are a woman who is juggling family, work, being a career, being a carer. What often happens is that as women, we spend a good proportion of our life feeling guilty. Guilty that we're not being a great mother, guilty we're not being a great carer, guilty that we're not being a great worker, that we're not being a great partner, a great wife. All sorts of guilt goes on. So if we set our expectations too high, that always happens. It's one of my biggest failings. I always expect I can achieve more than I do. So I'm always feeling disappointed with myself. So over the last few years, I've had to get a lot better at prioritizing. And people who prioritize are really, really good at thinking about what is really, really urgent? What do I really need to focus on? What is important, and how do I differentiate between them? And sometimes we just have to let go of the small stuff. If the beds aren't made, if the house isn't that tidy, if I haven't responded to a text, does it really, really matter? I think also successful women are almost great project managers. They run things with military precision, but at the same time, they know when to have fun. This can all get far too serious if we can't have fun with it. And they're great at avoiding procrastination, but they use that big picture focus to really set their priorities. One of the stories that I really liked, which is a great example of prioritisation, and I thought it might be quite good to include some men in our presentation, is a great story of the Olympic team who achieved huge success in rowing. This story is called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? And if you want to Google it, there's a lot of information on here. Basically, they developed this criteria, and what they did was they measured everything that they did against it, whether it was nutrition, whether it was training, whatever they did, they asked themselves the question, will it make the boat go faster? To the extent that some of them didn't even attend the Olympics opening ceremony because they felt it wouldn't make the boat go faster. So I wondered, if you were to develop your own proactive prioritization mission statement that would help you to stay focused, how might that help? Maybe it's something like that. Will this help me to get my career to the next level? Will this help me to get noticed for the right reasons? Will this help me to get to my right weight? We're all doing it, aren't we? And therefore, you can start thinking about what are you doing on a daily basis. Sometimes when we get overwhelmed, big goals are too much to think about and we have to focus on processes. And so by asking yourself that question, it allows us to focus on the process, which inevitably, if we're focusing on the process every day, we will achieve our goals. Another thing, and I think this is a real life thing, is to look at how you perhaps change your perspective. If we are going to get so caught up in achieving things, doing things, driving ourselves, then we're missing out on a big part of life. Often you will say to yourself, or I will say to myself, or I hear people saying to myself, I don't have time to go to the cinema, go out to dinner with my friends, play with the children, do exercise. Okay, I'm sure that you're thinking of them in your brains now, all of the things that you've said recently, I don't have time to. What about if you were to change that sentence? And using the same words, say this, it's not a priority to go to dinner with my friends. It's not a priority to play with the children. It's not a priority to do some fitness. That changes things, doesn't it? Because then you start to think about what really is important to me and what do I need to do to ensure that I'm focusing on my priorities in the right way. We have to remember that we have to live life because before we know it, 10 years will have passed and we'll be still wishing that we did things before. And that very much leads into the sixth of our eights, which is about ensuring that you are mentally and physically fit enough to achieve your dreams, whatever those might be. And this is a very, very serious one that we want to stop and spend a little bit of time on. Self-sustainability. How do we maintain peak performance and enjoy every single part of their life? Have a think about it now. Are you really loving your life? Does it feel fantastic, this gift that you've got, that you've been afforded, and you don't know how long you can have the gift for, but you're making the most out of every single day? Sometimes we don't think about it like that, do we? Sometimes we're just thinking about how do we get through. So the things that are really important, and these are the things that successful women pay attention to, are thinking about how do I re-energize myself? Again, I mentioned Stephen Covey, a great management guru, and Stephen Covey talks about sharpening the saw. He tells a story about two sets of lumberjacks who are competing to cut down trees. And one team goes for it, absolutely madly cutting down tree after tree, fast as they possibly can. They are well ahead in the competition and looking like they are going to be the favourites to win. The other team cuts down a tree and then sharpens the saw. And then they start again and they cut down another tree. And then they sharpen the saw. And then they carry on doing that. You know what's going to happen here, don't you? In the end, the other team's saw becomes so broken and unable to cut things down that the other team keep going and win the race. And we need to do that. We need to sharpen the saw. We need to think about, what is it that I do that re-energizes myself? And particularly if you're the type of person, for example, who's an introverted personality, who gets their energy by having some alone time and some thinking time. Our world nowadays isn't great at giving us thinking time, and we need it. But also balances home and work. Now, I have another theory on that I'm going to come to in just a second. And gets enough sleep. We aren't superwomen. I don't care what anybody says, and none of us can function. Well, if you can, please tell me how you do it. On 5 hours a night, it's just not possible. We're getting more and more likely to burn the candle at both ends, and then we wonder why suddenly our batteries really run dry. Also, people who sustain themselves have a really, really strong support system of people around them. They're not afraid to ask for help or to utilise the people around them. But I think more importantly, finds joy in every day. There is nothing more draining than those people who feel that their life is just one big negative slide to the end. Do you know those people? You might come into work in the morning feeling very, very positive, feeling very sorted, feeling like the weather's nice and, okay, it is work, but you're looking forward to spending a day with your colleagues. And then they seem to come out of the woodwork, don't they? They're a bit like the Dementors in Harry Potter. They suck the life out of you because they're so negative and everything's an issue or a problem or a drama. We actually need to protect ourselves because it can actually become quite pervasive negativity. We end up moaning with them. They also see their health as a priority, and they take time to have those checks and do fitness, do whatever it takes. And they also practice mindfulness. And I think this is one of the most important things that you need to think about in order to be healthy. So how do we do this? How do we balance home and work life? Well, there's a very interesting blogger around at the moment called Mother Pucker. I'm saying Pucker with a P very, very carefully, and she's quite fun to follow. Recently I read that she said, life isn't two parts. There is no work and life. There is just life. And I guess she's right. When we start to separate them, we become overly concerned by not being able to have time for home life. I think it's about identifying what our life is actually about. But as I mentioned, it's very much about mindfulness. The key is, if we can be present in everything that we do, we can start to really enjoy life as one. Too often, many of us get caught up in the when I trap, imagining our life will be better when I have done something or achieved something. When I lose weight, I will be even more confident. When I get a promotion, I'll really start enjoying working. Even sometimes I hear people saying, when I've got the wedding over, we can start doing this. What a shame that we're wishing our lives away. Life is here and now, so we need to ensure we're enjoying every minute. And that really shows to other people, which becomes pervasive in a very positive way. So, think about what you want for life And do embrace that off button. Sometimes what we need to do is to let go of perfect. It's very, very rare we can achieve perfection and not be a martyr and feel guilty all the time. If we want to spend some time on something that's important to us, enjoy it shamelessly. Do be clear about what you want your life to be and draw those boundaries with other people. I expect you find that in your life cycle of friends, you've got some friends who really, really energize you. But there are also people who do take, and don't give anything to you. And sometimes you have to think very, very carefully about who you spend your time with and what you do with them. Because if your time is short and you're proactively prioritizing, then you really, really need to think about who you want to spend your time with and focus on what really, really matters. So that means great time management and also being quite bold. The chairman of PepsiCo recently, I read, had a great initiative. They called it Leave Loudly, and I love that. Far too often we walk around and we leave work apologising, even if we're going at the time that we should be, or making excuses or justifications why we're doing that. So leave loudly means whatever you're doing, whether you're training for a triathlon, whether you just want to go to the cinema, or whether you've just had enough, actually, and want to go home and be alone, don't apologise. Just go. Say goodbye. I love that. So we're coming to our last two, eighths. And before we get to the sevenths, I want to talk about some shocking figures. Some research was done by Harvey Coleman, who was ex-IBM, across a whole variety of organisations to identify the factors that made people successful in life. And he came out with 3 factors that made people successful or even got them promoted quickly. Now, of course, one of them was about the way that they did the job and the quality of their work. It had to be. The second one was about their image. Now, when we say image, we don't mean are they beautiful or not, or attractive, or, how they dress necessarily. It's more about how they project themselves and present themselves in terms of the way that they fit in, the way that they use emotional intelligence, the way they're perceived. Are they perceived as somebody who's always putting their hand up and asking constructive questions, looking for new projects, sounding cheerful and positive? Or are they that person in the town hall meeting who's always moaning about things or being resistant to change? The final factor that he found was about visibility and how much people know who we are and what we do. So here are those shocking facts I promised. Only 10% of our success factors come from the way we do our job and our work quality. 30% comes from our image, and 60% comes from our visibility. And I'm sure, as it did for me when I first saw those figures, that's possibly sent you reeling, because what that's saying is you can be absolutely brilliant at doing your job, but if you just do it quietly and nobody really notices you or knows what you're doing, it's very, very likely you won't get noticed for promotion. If you want to put on your cynical heads, you could ask yourself the question, does that mean I could be rubbish at my job, but providing my image is right and my visibility is right, could I get promoted? And sadly, the answer is yes, I wouldn't want to try it, but there are people out there, I think, who perhaps do get promoted and aren't necessarily performing in the way that they thought they were performing once people find out after they've left. So this leads us to the importance of our 7th eighth, and that is natural networking. And that's the importance of having a really, really great network and also of enjoying networking. And I also want you to think about the fact that networking comes in many ways. It's not just going out and going to meetings. It might be going to coffee with people in different departments. It might be sending things to people that you've seen on LinkedIn. It might be just generally chatting to people in the lift as you go into work or talking to other contacts. So there's lots of different ways that you can network. But successful women always prioritize networking. Often we feel we just don't have time to do it, but even, half an hour in a week will make a difference. Lots of different things will help here, fostering relationships with people, not just because you need them, but because they might be somebody who it's useful to have in your network eventually. So don't wait until you need the IT department or HR before you start fostering a relationship with them. Using mentors, whether it's an internal mentor, an external mentor, a formal mentor, an informal mentor, this is all really, really important for you. But to be a great networker, you need to be somebody who puts themselves out there a bit, who builds rapport very, very quickly. So that means if you are stuck in the lift with somebody or in the queue for coffee, that you're the one who perhaps says, oh, hello, I don't think we have met, if they're within your organisation, or chats to people, and you will be amazed at what you find out. There's also an element of having a strong social media presence, and I'm particularly thinking here of LinkedIn, the way that you utilize LinkedIn, the way that you post, like other people's articles, using it appropriately, but also that you're always ready for somebody to ask you that knee-trembling question around who are you and what do you do, or to do that sudden rising death that goes around in meetings, or creeping death maybe I should say, where they say, let's all introduce ourselves, and then we end up wittering on with something far less than impactful. So one of the most important things is having an elevator pitch, and you've probably heard of this before, but it is a very, very short statement which talks about who you are and what you do. Maybe your unique selling point. I often hear people starting with things like, I'm Susan and I work in the accounts department. Not really impactful, is it? You don't work anywhere. You are responsible for, you're delighted to be managing. So there are lots of different ways that you can say it. I think it's really important for all of us to write this, to have something which is up our sleeves so that when the adrenaline and nerves get the better of us, we can do it. And also sound as if you really love your life as well, which is also really, really important. So, coming to our final 8, relentless resilience. And if we can master this, we can truly be anything, because it's around our ability to be strong, to be persistent, and as I said, to not just bounce back to where we were, but to bounce forward from any setbacks. Life is going to throw all sorts of stuff at us, and it's really critical that we're able to pick ourselves up and go again. So our ability to seek feedback, to take it on the chin and not overthink things is really, really one of the most important things about being successful. That allows us to develop this growth mindset and also not to find it all so stressful. Stress is only stress if you believe it to be so. And if you find that statement interesting, why not Google Kelly McGonigal on TED and see what she has to say on that subject. Success is not the way we think it is. People always look at other people's success and they think that was so easy to them, it's very, very linear. But what it really looks like is this. And I expect you're looking at that and thinking, yeah, that's about right for my success. certainly wasn't a straight line, and there were lots of things that interfered on the way. There are setbacks, there are rejections, there are problems, but tenacity always wins the day. Let's look at somebody who had the ultimate tenacity. J.K. Rowling, a suicidal single mother on support payments, writing in a cafe because she had no heating on at home. A lesson for us all there. And where does this tenacity come from? It comes from the way that we think and perceive things. And this model really helps us to think about how we are positioning ourselves in life. The way that we think about a subject, i.e. the way we process it, creates our state, the way we feel. And yes, you are always in a state, and it changes regularly during a day. And that state defines our behaviour. So earlier when we were talking about choosing your state, this is what we meant. For example, if my processing is this, I have an interview on Friday, and the way that I process the thinking is that I feel really nervous about the interview. I expect everybody else has got better qualifications than me, and I'm always useful at interviews. I sound so stupid when I answer questions. The type of state that I'm creating in myself will be one of nervousness and almost defeat. So when I arrive at the interview, it's going to leak out in my body language, and they will see the fear and nervousness, and it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. So do think about your language, how it sets you up for success, or whether it creates your own self-fulfilling prophecy. And the way that you position your thinking in your head is going to define, ultimately, how successful you are. So, as we near the end of our webinar, today we have looked at the 8/8s, how to really visualize your future, how to believe in yourself, to articulate clearly, how to have a fearless focus, to prioritize what you're doing for success, to get to love networking, and how to sustain your life, and to be resilient. So before we finish, let's look at some women who've used these and what they say. So some great quotes here. Eleanor Roosevelt, who really learnt how to manage her internal state. Meryl Streep, who understands the freedom of choices. Amelia Earhart, who looked at prioritizing and also not procrastinating. Oprah Winfrey, who talked about leaving your baggage behind and moving forward. And Ayn Rand, who had fearless focus, she just went for it. Helen Mirren, a great favourite of myself, she has some great sayings. Look fierce straight at its ugly face and barge forward. Yep, let's do it. And also, Helen Keller, a great achiever who really did believe in optimism. As we said earlier, you can't be perfect, and Sheryl Sandberg believes that done is better than perfect. And a lovely one from Samantha Ettus, don't live life in the past lane, let's go for the fast lane. So, Glinda the Good Witch, you had the power all along, my dear. And finally, one from me, don't wash the tea towels. And if you're wondering what that means, is don't get yourself cast in the role of somebody who's not a successful woman so that you're living up to stereotypes. If you really want to be successful, here's a suggestion for you. There's a website called Future Me. You can make a commitment to yourself today to change your life. You can email it, and it will send you an email back in a couple of months or a month, or however long you set it for, to remind yourself. So Google that and see whether you'd like to make a commitment to yourself today to change your life. I hope that something from today has resonated with you. And this will cause you to make some change to your life to be even more successful than I'm sure you already are. However, there are some women who are nowhere near your situation. They are held back by things which we can only imagine are so difficult that the thought of moving forward is almost impossible. That's why I'm doing this speakathon today for a charity that I feel really passionate about, Aurora New Dawn, that support women who are victims of crime, abuse and stalking. So if you have taken something from this presentation, perhaps you could make a small donation to help them. Perhaps if you could donate just the cost of one of your cups of coffee today, it would really help to pay it forward and support a woman who needs to change their life. Thank you so much for listening. Your company will be emailing this presentation round, so if you want to look at it and see the 8/8s again, by all means do. But thank you very much. Enjoy your day and good luck to you all.